Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Health Matters with Laura Kopek. I'm your host, Laura Kopek. And if you've been following along, the identity of my podcast is to really talk about health in a way that really matters. And that means to debunk, demystify, demyth, unpack, and call BS on some of the ways that we think about health and wellness, and what are the ways that we can empower ourselves to really take charge of our health, because that is when health matters, is when we have the tools, the knowledge to really take charge. This episode, as well as all my episodes, are for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only and are not a substitute for medical advice. Okay, today I'm going to focus on three topics. I'm really excited about talking about this. I find that these three words are often mistaken, misunderstood, and used in a way that doesn't allow us to take charge of our health. And that is stress, inflammation, and control. All right, let's do the deep dive. Stress. I'm sure that word brings a lot of ideas to your brain the minute you hear it. And they're not all positive, right? We hear the word stress and we think, oh my God. And, our stress levels on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the highest. How many of us would say 15, 20, 100? So let's talk about what stress really is and how to navigate it. When we think about stress, we're really only thinking about mental stress and the things that cause us to feel stressful, anxious, worried, and that is how we think about it. But stress is, in a way, all incoming information, whether it's affecting us mentally or physically or emotionally or spiritually. And sometimes even stress is considered good stress, but it's still received by the body as stress. So I, as an educator, really love to break things down in simplified terms to really help my listeners, my clients, my students, if you will, really understand. So the analogy I like to use about stress is, imagine that you walk around with an invisible backpack. And your core, right, the strength of your body, and that's going to be your genetics, epigenetics, diet and lifestyle, give your core the strength to carry around that backpack. And each kind of category of stress or thing that hits the body we'll consider a brick. And so the question is, how many bricks can you carry around at one time without collapsing under the weight of that backpack? And if you're going through a particular stressful period where there are more bricks in your backpack, then how do we take out some of those bricks so we can redistribute the levels of stress on your body across the board, mentally, physically, and emotionally, so that your body is not weighted down with the overall stress and how it's affecting you systemically? I want to start with an example that probably most of you are familiar with, and that's when you go on vacation. Have you ever found that you could eat some of the things you can't normally eat on a day-to-day basis, and you don't quite feel the effects that you would feel on a regular day? So one of the things that's happening when we're on vacation is that our overall stress is reduced. We may not be carrying around the brick of that conflict with a coworker, or the brick of the house is a mess and how do I stay on top of it, right? So some of those bricks have been taken out. And usually on vacation, there is a different time schedule that we're keeping. So maybe the constraints of got to be here at this time, got to be here at this time, got to be here at that time, the pressures of being successful, any of those things that we could really take apart and examine as whether or not that's a full brick or a half brick or several bricks into the backpack. But inflammatory food is going to account for a brick, and some of it is a bigger brick and a heavier brick because the inflammatory hit is harder. So that's a little bit of a crossover between stress and inflammation. But again, if we have taken out some of those bricks, there is room for different kinds of brick without feeling the overall effect of stress, which then becomes inflammation. So that's one example. I worked with a client once who had this exact scenario happening relative to a particular food. And he noticed it as a particular symptom that he was having during the work week. And he couldn't really figure it out. It was digestive issues. They were affecting him during the work week. He went down the regular diagnostic path and ruled out ulcers and reflux and all of that. So the question of what was going on in session, and the diet really wasn't much different 7 days a week. But really, what was happening is the stress was so heavy during his work week, including the stress of being sedentary, right? Sitting at a desk, that if he took out a few inflammatory foods to compensate for the bricks he was putting in his backpack during the work week, including heavy time on the computer screen, sedentary, then he could have that flexibility on the weekend, and the digestive system, or the digestive symptom, if you will, went away. So that's an example about how a strategy of looking at your overall weight of stress and what needs to be unpacked, if you will, in a way that inflammation can be addressed. Stress is going to have an effect on the body, and it's going to have an effect in a variety of different ways. Sometimes the fight or flight is going to be triggered, and that is going to cause certain types of nutritional deficiencies, if you will, chemical imbalances that really can be addressed with a better support system. So if the core, again, of the body and how it walks around carrying that backpack of bricks is strengthened, then that even sometimes makes the load lighter, or navigating that can allow bricks to be taken out, put back in. One of my favorite ways, or one of my favorite areas of talking about this, is when the body's sick, when it's having a virus. Virus in particular is going to adapt within your own inflammatory load, in your own stress load. And so what's really important isn't just rest, right, which is going to automatically take out some of those bricks, but accelerating healing in acute issues has to do with taking out a lot of those bricks so that the body's energy can truly be diverted or focused on the healing, right? If you're walking around carrying a load of bricks, how far, what is the distance you can go, and how much energy are you expending just carrying that around? And how light and redirected can your body get if that is addressed? I know that a lot of people don't often want to change their diet when they're sick. We talk about comfort foods, and you don't feel well, so just eat what you want. But that is so debilitating to the body because it's in a critical state of needing its energy to be directed towards healing. This is why fasting has become so popular, because the downtime, right, the amount of time the body is not in digestion, invested in that energy, allows its energy to do other things. And it's so cool when you put the body in an environment where it can optimize its performance, right? When you look at athletes, they want to be lighter, faster all the time. All the equipment, the technology is moving towards that. Swimsuits that allow fraction of a second to be carved off. Racing bikes that are so lightweight, right? That the cyclist doesn't have to effortlessly carry that bike around with them. Tennis shoes that, or footwear that allows for that speed. So internally with your cells, your body isn't that much different. Inflammation, a lot of us know that when we're not feeling well, we might need to go to the doctors to get a diagnosis. But sometimes the diagnosis is, well, I have this, so there's nothing else I can do. Instead of understanding that when inflammation, or when our body becomes inflamed, it's going to target weaker areas. So, and this also accounts for the way that cells regenerate, bacteria, viruses, all of that kind of affect the body. But inflammation is the way that the body is letting you know that this area has become more vulnerable, but the inflammation is going to be in more than one area. Our bodies are whole units, they work systemically, and usually what is needed is a mapping of that inflammation to determine what is really the cause. And that's super important, especially as a functional practitioner educator, how important that mapping process is to me. It's the way that I have come to practice and work with people in all areas, because what you're trying to find is the way that the body is letting you know really what is going on, how one thing affects another. What is the skin saying about what is going on in your microbiome, or what is going on in a particular organ, or what it says about your diet? What does your microbiome say about your habits? Diet, lifestyle, sleep is so undervalued in terms of what that says about your overall health and wellness. And so sometimes if somebody comes to me and they want to focus on one particular area, definitely we have priorities on how we want to address our health. But unpacking it and kind of figuring out what it's all connected to gives you a different place to start, and how to navigate that in terms of really taking charge of your health and overall is going to be a much more sustainable. And look, we deserve to understand our bodies at a fundamental level, and that's not being taught at school. There's really nothing in that. When a manufacturer produces food, and what they're trying to do to get the consumer to buy it, even though we're trending more towards health, it's not always healthy because we don't even really understand that as a concept. Control. This is another word that I'm sure triggers a lot of different thoughts for people, and not a lot of positive thoughts. We think about the need for control, or controlling people to be more on the aggressive side, to be more on the my way or the highway. And again, I think we lose all the nuances and the complexities of what is really going on. So what if we start with a level playing field, and say that as puberty happens and frontal lobe development is happening, so we're in a critical thinking developmental phase of the brain, what if we're all looking for control? And as adults, what if all of us have some level of control issues? If everyone has control issues and it's a level playing field, then maybe we can unpack and look at control in a way that helps us become more balanced. And being balanced means that we're not tipping the scales in terms of stress, because control in any way it manifests itself can be very debilitating. And it's not just something that's affecting our mental health, The body does keep the score. And as I talked about, in terms of how the body's navigating stress, and even the simplest things of just cortisol imbalance. That term adrenal fatigue is one of many that just kind of rubs me a little bit because, women are walking around mistakenly thinking they have a hormone imbalance, or now it's adrenal fatigue. And that's a symptom. What if adrenal fatigue is, again, just the exhaustion of carrying a load that we shouldn't be carrying? And instead of talking about it as a condition, talking about it as a symptom and what the body is telling us in a mapping. Okay, so coming back to control. Okay, I want to talk about one of the most misunderstood ways in which we are seeking control. And that is people pleasing, and sometimes doing for others, generosity. And when we think about that, we think, goodness, that's giving of ourselves, right? Like, what could be wrong with trying to please others? And what could be wrong with trying to be generous? The problem is if we are attached to the outcome, then it's not really about giving of ourselves. It's about trying to get the other person to behave a certain way so that we can feel valued, outside of creating value from within. Okay, so let's unpack this a little bit. The idea that, oh, I don't want to say such and such to my boss. Say, let's take this as an example. Say you have an issue with a coworker, and that coworker is in a position of authority, and you feel like if you are honest with your truth, that you might upset them or you might offend them. And it's not that we should just, walk in and offend somebody, but the question is, am I not speaking a truth, a boundary, because I am laying something on that other person and trying to manipulate and control their response? How many of us are using this in the way we parent? I think that we have these expectations surrounding our children. Often parents are gravitating towards either the happiness of their children being the predominant outcome or the success of their children being the predominant outcome. And sometimes it's a combination, but if the outcome is to create a situation where your child thinks, feels, and acts a certain way, then is that really allowing them to figure out how to think for themselves, how to navigate their feelings and develop emotional integrity and behave in a way that is integral to healthy thinking and healthy feelings? They're having an experience where they're guided to that end product. But too often, raising children is about, oh, I want this for my child. I want this and that. And usually it's wrapped up in our own experiences as children. And if that's the case, it's possible that we need to stop and ask ourselves, is this possibly a need to control the outcome of what my child's life looks like because I have unresolved issues about what my childhood looked like and became as an adult? Let's take that and talk about the word listen. How many of us use the word listen correctly. In conflict, it's often, you're not listening to me. And then do we associate on the receiving end that listen may mean control or authority? And then that actually perpetuates somebody not wanting to listen. But listen often is used to say, you're not doing what I want you to do. So the word listen has to be looked at in a way where, am I just asking to be heard? You don't hear me. Well, most of the time we're heard. Are we understood? That definitely, when we say, listen, you're not listening to me, what we're really possibly saying is, you don't understand me. But in understanding, are we expecting that person on the receiving end that is supposed to be quote unquote listening? Are we expecting them to change their personal narrative, to change their thoughts, feelings, and actions according to the way we navigate something? Because then that's just control. Um, and the healthiness of a relationship is that first begins with ourselves, right? And looking at the way we think, the way we feel, the way we behave, taking those apart and looking and seeing if those are healthy, what things are affecting that, right? Going back to the start of this, what stress affects the way we think, feel, and behave, what inflammation affects the way we think, feel, and behave, because so much of what we're doing in life is trying to control outcomes so that we don't have to do the real work that doesn't feel good. I truly believe, too, that a lot of what is underneath this is fear. And I think that we're navigating so much from a place of fear. And when we get into fear, we get into survival mode. And when we get into survival mode, we are not in a place where we could be optimizing the health of our thinking, optimizing the health and integrity of our feelings, and then behaving accordingly. And the reason that we're in such a place of fear is because, at least in this country and culture, I believe that there's profiting to be made over fear. If people are kept in a place of fear, they navigate in a place where they will do whatever it takes to control the outcome so that they have empowered themselves. And operating from that fear doesn't mean that people are always making the best decisions. And then people will buy things, constantly buy into ideas where they can feel more in control. So, we're to look at this differently. It's, again, it's looking at a whole new way of thinking about how this might be impacting health and how health might be impacting this, and really looking at key terms and concepts, and how looking at them and asking ourselves really important questions might change the outcome. We sometimes can put ourselves in a place where we are trying to control all of it and not even recognize that's what's happening. And the idea of taking personal responsibility just makes the burden of carrying it all that much greater. But unpacking it and really looking at these things in a way that is freeing, in a way where we can navigate in a healthier way, then and looking at total health and wellness in a whole new light, that burden we place on ourselves is actually walking through the tunnel into, a vision of our life where it's, the stress is minimal, the inflammation is minimal, the control is minimal, and that's a much better place of being healthy and happy, and our relationships around us and the outcomes are much more satisfying because we don't see ourselves as the center of all things. We don't operate from a place of fear. We're not thinking that if we just do this, this, and this, we'll get this and this. We find that from within, and then we move through our lives in a way that then the experience is much more enriching and fulfilling. Well, that's it for today. I hope you really enjoyed today's episode and that it gives you pause to think about your overall experience relative to your total health and wellness and how you might approach that in a different way of thinking, feeling, behaving, a different way of considering these black and white, the way that we make these concepts, these terms, these words very black and white, and exclude ourselves from thinking about it in a bigger way, bigger and smaller, right? Like looking at it, oh, these things might be affecting my overall health and wellness. And part of it might be because I compartmentalize it into these little boxes and don't look at the ways in which it really is the spoke of the wheel and how the different spokes make my whole life, my whole wheel go round and round. All right. Well, I'm Laura Kopek. Please, for more information, check out my website, other podcast episodes, schedule an appointment with me. I'd love to work with you and do a deep dive into your health and wellness from an educational place where you can really do some of this work. So again, join me for another episode. And I'm Laura Kopek, your host, and have a great day and to your health.